The world of international trade is riveted by a legal clash at the United States Supreme Court, where the stakes could not be higher. At the heart of this drama is a question that will shape the future of global commerce and American governance for years to come. President Trump's sweeping tariffs, imposed on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of goods, now face a constitutional reckoning. The outcome could redefine the limits of presidential power in the realm of economic policy. The core issue is deceptively simple. Did the president overstep his authority by imposing broad tariffs under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA? This decades-old law was designed to give the executive branch flexibility in times of crisis, but critics argue it was never meant to grant unchecked power over trade. In August 2025, the U.S. Court of Appeals delivered a landmark ruling, declaring the tariffs illegal. The court stated that IEEPA doesn't grant the president unilateral power to levy duties, emphasizing the need for checks and balances in government. The Trump administration, determined to defend its trade agenda, swiftly petitioned the Supreme Court to overturn the decision. For now, the tariffs remain in place, but the uncertainty has sent shockwaves through the business world. Businesses and global markets are left in limbo, anxiously awaiting the court's decision on whether to hear the case. Investors, manufacturers, and workers alike are bracing for the potential fallout, as billions of dollars and countless jobs hang in the balance. This isn't just about trade, it's a fundamental test of the separation of powers. At stake is Congress's constitutional authority to tax and regulate commerce, a power that has defined the American system since its founding. The administration's use of emergency powers has ignited fierce debate over executive overreach. Legal scholars, politicians, and citizens are all weighing in, questioning how much authority any president should wield in the name of national security. The Supreme Court's ruling will set a precedent for presidential authority, shaping the balance of power between the branches of government for generations. The decision will echo far beyond the courtroom, influencing future presidents and lawmakers. Billions of dollars, the livelihoods of American workers, and the very future of U.S. trade policy hang in the balance as the nation, and the world, waits for the Supreme Court's next move. In April 2025, President Trump launched a flat 10% tariff on nearly all imports, targeting allies and rivals alike. The administration argued these tariffs would protect American jobs and address chronic trade deficits, invoking IEEPA as legal justification. Critics countered that IEEPA was never meant for broad economic policy, warning it could give presidents unchecked power over the economy. The tariffs generated $159 billion in revenue, but sparked immediate backlash from legal scholars and business groups. Unlike previous targeted tariffs, these sweeping measures were justified as a response to an economic national emergency. The legal battle over whether trade deficits qualify as such an emergency set the stage for a constitutional showdown. What began as a trade dispute quickly escalated into a crisis over the limits of presidential power. The sudden imposition of 10% tariffs sent shockwaves through American businesses, catching many off guard and sparking immediate concern across industries. News of the tariffs dominated headlines, and business owners scrambled to understand how these new costs would impact their bottom line. Companies faced a difficult choice: absorb the increased costs themselves, which could erode already thin profit margins, or pass those costs on to customers by raising prices, risking a loss of competitiveness and customer loyalty. For small and medium-sized enterprises, many of which rely heavily on global supply chains for materials and products, the tariffs posed existential threats. As costs soared, some businesses struggled to keep shelves stocked, while others faced delays in mounting paperwork just to keep operations running. The uncertainty surrounding future trade policy paralyzed investment and hiring decisions. Business leaders hesitated to expand, fearing that sudden policy shifts could make long-term planning nearly impossible. International partners, once eager to collaborate, now hesitated to engage with American firms, worried about unpredictable U.S. trade actions and the risk of getting caught in the crossfire. The Liberty Justice Center stepped in, representing small businesses in court. They argued that the tariffs caused widespread harm, skyrocketing material costs, delayed product launches, and disrupted day-to-day operations, making it harder for businesses to survive. Ironically, tariffs intended to protect American industry often ended up hurting the very businesses and workers they were meant to help, leading to layoffs, plant closures, and lost opportunities. Globally, trading partners retaliated with their own tariffs, targeting U.S. exports and escalating the trade war. American farmers, manufacturers, and exporters, suddenly found themselves shut out of key markets. The result was a volatile, unpredictable global marketplace. Businesses struggled to plan for the future, while consumers faced higher prices and fewer choices at the store. The dream of rebalancing trade quickly gave way to a messy, multi-front conflict, with new barriers and complications emerging at every turn. In the end, stability was replaced by risk and uncertainty at every level, leaving both businesses and consumers to navigate a landscape transformed by trade wars. The legal journey to the Supreme Court was anything but straightforward. It was marked by a series of conflicting lower court rulings, each deepening the uncertainty and raising the stakes for all involved. As the legal landscape shifted, businesses, policymakers, and the public watched anxiously, unsure of what the next decision would bring. The U.S. Court of International Trade was the first to weigh in, ruling the tariffs unlawful. The court cited procedural failures under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA, arguing that the administration had not followed the required legal steps before imposing such sweeping measures. Not long after, a D.C. District Court went even further. In a bold move, it declared that IEPA doesn't authorize the president to impose tariffs at all, challenging the very foundation of the administration's actions and sending shockwaves through legal and political circles. These decisions emboldened opponents of the tariffs, who saw the courts as a powerful check on executive authority. Legal analysts debated the implications on national television, while business leaders and protesters voiced their support for the rulings, hoping for lasting change. The U.S. Court of Appeals soon stepped in, consolidating the various legal challenges. The court rejected the administration's argument that trade imbalances constituted a national emergency, a key justification for the tariffs, and further complicated the legal landscape. This created a direct and public conflict with the executive branch's interpretation of its own powers. Inside the White House, officials debated their next move. As the legal tug-of-war intensified and the nation's attention turned to the courts, the patchwork of rulings from different courts made Supreme Court intervention almost inevitable. With legal files piling up and confusion mounting, it became clear that only the highest court could provide a definitive answer. The administration, left with no other viable option, formally appealed to the nation's highest court. Legal teams prepared their arguments knowing the outcome would have far-reaching consequences for the country. The stakes were enormous. Not just the fate of the tariffs, but the very boundaries of presidential authority in economic matters. Business leaders, lawmakers, and citizens alike watched closely, aware that the decision would shape future policy. The Supreme Court now faces the daunting task of resolving what many have called a constitutional crisis. The eyes of the nation are fixed on the justices as they weigh arguments that could redefine the balance of power. The outcome will not only determine the limits of executive power in economic policy, but also set a precedent for generations to come, shaping the relationship between the branches of government and the future of American law. At the heart of the case is the Constitution's clear grant of taxing power to Congress, not the president. The Trump administration argues that broad executive authority under IEPA is essential for modern foreign policy and economic threats. Critics warn that allowing the president to declare economic emergencies over trade deficits sets a dangerous precedent. Congress has responded with bipartisan efforts to limit presidential use of IEPA for tariffs. For Trump, a Supreme Court loss would undermine a signature policy. A win would expand executive power for future presidents. The decision will shape not just trade, but the very nature of the American presidency. The stakes are legal, political, and constitutional. The court's ruling will echo through every branch of government. The Supreme Court's decision carries massive financial consequences. If the tariffs are struck down, the government could be forced to refund $159 billion collected from importers. This would create a sudden, enormous hole in the federal budget, forcing tough fiscal choices. Processing refunds would be a logistical nightmare, with thousands of businesses awaiting repayment. For companies, refunds could mean survival or recovery, but the uncertainty complicates planning. Many passed costs to consumers, so refunds may not reach those who paid higher prices. The episode highlights the chaos and complexity of the policy's financial impact. Whether collected or repaid, the tariffs have already reshaped the economic landscape. The final outcome promises further turbulence no matter which way the court rules. The world is watching the Supreme Court, as U.S. tariffs have strained even the closest alliances. Allies saw the measures as unjustified and damaging to trust in the global trading system. A ruling upholding the tariffs would signal U.S. endorsement of unilateral disruptive trade policy. Striking them down would reassure partners that American checks and balances are intact. The administration insists tariffs are vital leverage in negotiations, but critics argue they undermine cooperation. The court's decision will shape America's reputation as a global economic partner. The outcome could accelerate protectionism or restore faith in international rules. Trust, cooperation, and the future of global trade hang in the balance. As of October 2025, the Supreme Court's decision will define the future of American trade policy. Upholding the president's authority would entrench executive power and trade volatility, making tariffs a standard tool. Businesses would face ongoing uncertainty, and global relations could become more confrontational. Striking down the tariffs would reaffirm Congress's role, trigger massive refunds, and restore stability. The ruling would force closer collaboration between Congress and the executive on trade. For global markets, it could signal a return to predictable, rules-based policy. The precedent set will constrain or empower future presidents on economic matters. Ultimately, the court's choice is about the character of American governance and its place in the world.